last thing you ever heard from the person you loved was nothing. No closure, no goodbye, not even silence wrapped in kindness. Just disappearance. Not a breakup, a vanishing act. She was gone, like a ghost in daylight, like a story that erased its final page while you were still reading. Adrian didn't lose Layla in a fight. There was no screaming, no slammed doors, no bitter words. That would have been easier. That would have meant he mattered enough to be fought with. Instead, it happened like this. One night, she kissed him on the forehead, told him she was tired, slipped her hand out of his, curled up beside him, and slept. The next morning, she left early. He found a half-drunk cup of coffee, her toothbrush still in the sink. But by noon, she had blocked him on everything. No note, no reason, no trace. That's how people disappear, when they want to hurt you without looking like they did. That's how someone can collapse your world without raising their voice. And for days, maybe weeks, Adrian thought it had to be a mistake. He waited, checked his phone every few minutes, replayed old messages like sacred scripture, wondered what he did wrong, wondered if maybe she had a reason, some excuse, something that would make the emptiness make sense. But nothing came, and slowly, something darker replaced the ache. Not rage, not grief, something colder, clarity. He realized she hadn't left him because he didn't matter. She left because she always assumed he'd stay, waiting. Waiting for a text, waiting for closure, waiting to be seen. But this time, he didn't. He wrote a message that night, a long one. He poured everything into it, his heartbreak, his confusion, his pain. He stared at it for hours, hands shaking, heart racing. Then he deleted it. That was the moment everything changed. Because in that act of erasing, Adrian discovered something that most men never do. Sometimes, the loudest thing you'll ever say is nothing at all. That wasn't silence. That was strategy. That was the birth of a different kind of power. Not the power to win her back, the power to never need her again. It's easy to think silence is weakness, that not reacting means you don't care. But the truth is, silence, when it's chosen, is psychological warfare. And in the stillness, when you stop explaining, stop chasing, stop performing for someone who already decided to stop looking at you, that's when they hear the loudest echo of all. The sound of your absence replacing your affection. This isn't just Adrian's story. It's every man who's ever been ghosted, discarded, or devalued, and chose not to retaliate, but to rise. And this isn't just about relationships. It's about reclaiming your voice in a world that profits off your noise and ignores your worth. This is a different kind of story, a quiet one. But once you hear it, you won't forget it. Before we dive deeper into the mind of a man rebuilding his life without saying a word, into the 10 silent weapons that turn heartbreak into strength, take a second to subscribe to the channel. Not just because it helps us grow, but because this kind of content, it's made for those who feel like their story was cut off before it was ever told. And we're here to finish it with power, clarity, and fire. Subscribe now. Support what speaks to your silence. Question for you. Let's see who you really are. If someone ghosted you without closure, what would you do? A. Reach out. Try to fix it. B. Say nothing. Rebuild in silence. Drop your answer in the comments, A or B, and tell us why. Your answer might just help someone who's going through it now. After Layla disappeared, Adrian didn't become stronger overnight. He unraveled. But not in the way she might have expected. There were no angry outbursts, no vague posts begging for attention, no dramatic public displays of pain. His unraveling happened quietly, like a cocoon dissolving to make room for something unrecognizable. What most people don't understand is that when a man goes silent, truly silent, not as a manipulation, not as a tactic, but as a statement of self-respect, it changes the air around him. It shifts his gravitational pull. Silence isn't void. It's recalibration. Adrian's collapse was real. At first, it wasn't graceful or empowering. It was desperate. He replayed memories like security footage, searching for the moment the light started to fade in her eyes. He scrutinized every "I love you," every silence between words, wondering what he missed. But eventually, he realized that her leaving wasn't a surprise. It was the conclusion to a story he had been ignoring. He wasn't being loved. He was being tolerated. And worse, he was performing for approval that never came. But here's the truth no one tells you. Collapse is sacred. It's a funeral for the version of you that bent, begged, and betrayed your own peace to be chosen. And when Adrian hit that bottom, there was no audience. Just him, his own breath, and the question, what now? The first thing he did was stop running from the silence. He sat in it. Let it suffocate the noise of old expectations. Let it strip away every distraction he used to avoid himself. Social media, mindless conversations, hollow affirmations from people who only liked him when he was small. And what he found in that void was not emptiness. It was unclaimed territory. It was the first space he'd ever occupied that wasn't influenced by someone else's approval. It was his. He began rebuilding, not by changing his environment, but by reclaiming his sovereignty. He didn't shave his head. He didn't get a new tattoo. He didn't even buy new clothes. What he did was far more radical. He removed himself from every emotional economy where he was being undervalued. He stopped explaining, stopped asking people to understand his side. And in doing so, he created mystery. Not the kind used to lure people back, but the kind that says, "You don't get to know me anymore." He wasn't hiding. He was becoming scarce. And in a world flooded with noise, scarcity is powerful. C became deliberate with his words. So much so that days would pass without speaking to anyone who didn't deserve access to his thoughts. When you move like that, people notice. They just don't understand. And that's the point. Layla, wherever she was, likely assumed he'd be broken. She probably thought he'd spiral, because that's what people expect when they've seen you only through the lens of emotional need. But Adrian didn't spiral. He sharpened. He began waking up early again, cooking his meals from scratch, reading instead of scrolling, writing not about her, but about himself. Not about what he lost, but about what he could become. This wasn't some dramatic reinvention. It was a return to the version of himself that didn't need external validation to feel grounded. He stopped thinking about getting her back and started thinking about who he never again wanted to be. The man who apologized for having needs. The man who waited in silence for someone else to define his worth. Detachment wasn't coldness. It was warmth turned inward. It was love rerouted to where it belonged all along. Himself. And then came the strange part. People noticed. Not just Layla, who started viewing his stories again from a burner account. Not just the mutual friends who casually mentioned, "You look different lately." But strangers, new connections, women who hadn't known the old version of him, all drawn to something they couldn't name. It wasn't looks. It wasn't charm. It was presence. Adrian had stopped orbiting anyone. He had become the gravity. His silence became so full of energy that people leaned in just to feel the calm. That's the paradox. When you stop needing to be understood, you start being respected. When you no longer chase, you attract what's aligned. And when you hold your attention like gold, you only spend it on things that grow you. He wasn't bitter. He wasn't angry. He didn't post cryptic quotes or call her names. That would have made her central. That would have made her the story. But she wasn't the story. She was the trigger. And the story was always Adrian. One morning, he looked at a picture of himself from just 6 months before. Eyes tired, posture slouched, smiling too wide in a photo with someone who had already left him emotionally. He didn't recognize that man. And that was the greatest victory of all. Because Layla never got a dramatic goodbye. She never got the closure. She never got to watch him glow up with the satisfaction of, "I knew." Adrian's story is not one of heartbreak. It's one of rebirth. At the beginning, he thought silence was a symptom of defeat, a sign of weakness, a retreat. But as he walked through the fire, alone, uncelebrated, and unseen, he discovered what very few do. Silence, when it is born from discipline, is not absence. It is presence. It is power. He didn't chase. He didn't beg. He didn't try to control the narrative. Instead, he rewrote the entire script of who he was becoming. When Layla walked away, she believed she had the upper hand. She assumed Adrian would wait in the wings, holding out hope, desperate for validation. What she didn't see coming was his decision to vanish, not as a manipulation, but as a liberation. He deleted the message. He deleted the performance. He deleted the idea that someone else's recognition was required to validate his value. And in that deletion, Adrian began to evolve. He chose solitude over attention, discipline over desperation, purpose over performance. He didn't glow up for the sake of revenge. He didn't weaponize his silence to cause pain. He simply became someone she could no longer interpret, because she no longer had access to the frequency he now lived on. That is the essence of real transformation. Not becoming louder, not becoming colder, but becoming unshakably still. In the stillness, Adrian found his rhythm again. He reclaimed his mornings. He rebuilt his focus. He grew in ways no one could see, but everyone would eventually feel. The man she thought she'd left behind had outgrown the version of himself that once needed her. And what haunts the past is not regret for what was, but the realization of what could have been, had they seen the real you when it mattered. But by then, it's too late. Adrian's story is a reminder. You don't need to explain your worth. You need to embody it. Quietly, relentlessly, with zero need for applause. Let them wonder. Let them whisper. Let them circle back to a door that no longer exists. You stay silent because you're building something louder than words ever could be. A life they're no longer invited to witness. Lesson for life. The deepest power you can ever possess is not how loudly you can speak, but how deeply you can stand still. In a culture that rewards constant expression, your refusal to overshare becomes your protection. Your restraint becomes your magnetism, and your silence becomes your legacy. So when someone leaves you without explanation, don't beg for closure, be it. When they stop choosing you, don't prove why they should. Choose yourself. And when they expect your collapse, surprise them with your calm. Because healing isn't loud, evolution isn't public, and strength, it doesn't shout, it whispers. Quick question for you. If someone leaves without warning, what's the stronger move? A. Reach out to seek closure. B. Let your silence speak for itself. Comment A or B below and let us know why you chose it. Your answer might help someone who's at that exact crossroad right now. We'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think of Adrian's journey? Have you ever been in a similar situation? What did silence teach you? Drop your experience in the comments. Someone out there might really need to hear your perspective. And if this story resonated with you, hit subscribe, give this video a like, and share it with someone who might need a quiet reminder that they are not alone in their silence. This channel exists to bring stories like this to light, stories that don't scream, but still echo in your bones. Support the journey. Support the silence. Subscribe for more.